Welcome to the 700 Club. For today's headlines, let's go over to the CBN News Desk.
Gordon, Americans along the Upper East Coast are facing a tropical storm warning today, as severe weather from Tropical Storm Elsa could lead to possible tornadoes and flash floods as it moves north. This after hitting the southeast and mid-Atlantic states in the last few days with heavy rains and storms. Mark Martin has a story.
Elsa plows up the East Coast, bringing with it heavy rain, powerful winds, and the possibility of tornadoes.
Utter chaos over here right now.
Forecasters predicted Elsa's heaviest rain to hit New York City in time for the morning commute, just hours after a different storm produced flash flooding. Commuters faced what looked like underground lakes as subway stations flooded. The waters disabled some of the city's highways and streets. Police rescued more than a dozen people from this expressway. Before hitting the Northeast, Elsa gained strength over the Carolinas. In Virginia, this driver got his Ford Mustang stuck in feet of water. Elsa had produced at least one tornado in every state it hit as of late Thursday. This video shows the powerful twister that struck Jacksonville, Florida. The 110-mile-an-hour winds wreaked havoc in the area. The damaging winds toppled trees. One person died in Jacksonville after a tree crushed his car.
Poor gentleman was just driving, probably heading home, and a tree came down and hit his car.
And in Georgia, another tornado formed because of Elsa. The EF2 twister carved through a Navy base, destroying trailers and sending debris flying. 9 people went to the hospital.
I come out and there's guys pushing his kids out the top door over here.
Large trees fell on homes and businesses. Elsa led to nearly 50 million people being under flash flood watches as it moved up the East Coast. Back in the Northeast, the tropical storm could produce 5 inches of rain as it travels to Boston by midday, carrying with it winds up to 50 miles per hour. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Thank you, Mark. Some pretty dramatic pictures there. President Biden's plan to leave Afghanistan by the end of August is meeting with a skeptical response from members of both parties in Congress. The president looking to end the nearly 20-year war. Biden saying Thursday it's time to end the nation's longest war. More than 2,400 Americans have been killed and more than 20,000 have been injured while overseas.
So let me ask those who want us to stay. How many more? How many thousands more Americans' daughters and sons are you willing to risk? How long would you have them stay? Already we have members of our military whose parents fought in Afghanistan 20 years ago. Would you send their children and their grandchildren as well? Would you send your own son or daughter? We have a point person.
The president says continuing to fight a war indefinitely is not in the security interest of the United States. But after the president spoke, Texas Congressman Michael McCaul, the top Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, warned that the Taliban is gaining more ground every day, saying the president only offered empty promises and no detailed plan of action. The Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire said she remains deeply concerned about the deteriorating conditions in that country. In Israel, archaeologists have uncovered 2 chambers in the tunnels near Jerusalem's Western Wall from the Second Temple built during the Old Testament period and was still standing, existing during the time of Jesus. The structures are part of a new route opening soon to the public that takes visitors back to ancient days. Chris Mitchell brings us a story from Jerusalem.
The discoveries are the highlight of a new route through the Western Wall tunnels that sheds light on Jewish life in Jerusalem during the time of Jesus.
So it's unbelievable to see this new excavation here. Maybe 15 years ago when I started guiding here, I was standing above us and saying, you know, underneath the arch, there's something. So now we are inside that something.
YOHANNA BISRAOR from the Western Wall Heritage Foundation said the new route will open in a few months. VIPs were invited this day for a preview.
And we have a beautiful complex from the Second Temple period, maybe one of the most beautiful next to the Western Wall. You can see ritual bath, beautiful columns.
The discovery began here more than 100 years ago, when British archaeologist Charles Warren climbed through a hole into this room. Now archaeologists have uncovered 2 more chambers.
And when we saw this room, which was the first thing to be revealed in the new excavations, we were excited because we realized what was not known then, that we are actually in the parallel room of the Hasmonean or Herodian Hall that was already known since Warren's time, since the 19th century. This is one big building.
The discovery of these rooms, less than 100 feet away from the Temple Mount, adds another layer of understanding to Second Temple times 2,000 years ago.
It was a building for the elite of the city, for the city councillors, for the rulers, a meeting place of them, a place where they could host their important guests just before climbing with them up to the Temple Mount.
It's unlikely that Jesus would have been a guest here.
If Jesus was a guest of the city councillors of Jerusalem at that time, he could. And the building was a place to host the elite, so who knows? I'm not so sure he was considered to be such an honor, but who knows? Who knows? Everything is possible.
IAA Excavation Director Shlomit Wexler-Bodalak said the only other building decorated like this one in Jerusalem at the time was the Temple Mount itself. And there's more, an indoor fountain and reservoir connecting the two chambers.
Here you see the capitals. They are still preserved. In the center of each capital, there is a hole. In this hole, there is a lead pipe that is inserted, where the water would come out. This is a fountain that was within a very magnificent building, so possibly they could control the flow of water. When there were guests and they wanted to impress them, they opened and the water would have flowed. When there was no guest, they closed.
At some point, this room was repurposed as a huge mikveh or ritual bath, maybe the largest in Jerusalem. Archaeologists say that could have been done shortly before the temple was destroyed and the Jewish people scattered in 70 A.D.
2 weeks before the 9th of Av, the Hebrew month of Av, which is the day of the destruction of the Second Temple, for us to reveal that today. And maybe let's learn from the past and just learn something for the future. That's something very moving for us.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, the Western Wall Tunnels, Jerusalem.
Thank you, Chris. Here at home, the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. has just opened a special exhibit on the Magna Carta, the historic Great Charter of Freedoms from England, first written back in the year 1215. The museum's display boasts some of the most precious artifacts in the Western world. And as Jennifer Wishon reports, tourism officials hope it's the type of exhibit that draws visitors back to the city. Take a look.
Just in time for America's Independence Day, the Museum of the Bible is displaying 2 versions of the Magna Carta and much more.
Everybody knows about Magna Carta, but most people, I would assume, don't know that the first clause of Magna Carta is about the freedom of the church, and that one of the authors of Magna Carta is an Archbishop, Stephen Langton, who is a biblical scholar and used his theological knowledge and expertise to use the Bible to argue against what the king was doing.
The Magna Carta was revised several times. The museum has the version from the year 1300, which was viewed by American founding father Thomas Paine, author of Common Sense, and the 1217 version that started something spectacular.
The 1217 document is the one that essentially goes on to become English law.
Also on display, the Charters of the Forest that reestablished certain rights for the lower classes of the period and were issued in conjunction with each Magna Carta. There's also a medieval sword, a replica of King John's bejeweled clothing, and a lawyer's reference copy of early English law. Despite the Magna Carta's message of individual freedom, the exhibit also points out the extreme anti-Semitism of the time. In 1217, the king's regent issued a dire directive,
which made it a law that the Jews in England had to wear a badge on their clothes to identify themselves. And so England becomes the first country in Europe to make this a legal requirement.
The exhibit includes the Codex Valmadana, which dates from 1189. The only known Jewish text to survive the eventual expulsion of Jews from England in 1290.
And so, again, part of our story is that rights need to be defended and justice needs to be continuously fought for.
It's the type of mega attraction tourism officials in Washington, D.C. and cities across the country hope draw in badly missed tourists.
It's exciting to be where we are, but to really look at the economic hit that we've taken as an industry has been a very difficult road.
In Washington, tourism generates $8 billion and accounts for 80,000 jobs. Typically, the city hosts more than 20 major conventions. This year, they'll host 3. Tourism officials are marketing to people who live within driving distance of the city. And Ferguson points out while most cities are open for business, tourists should expect some changes.
Keep in mind that if you're coming to the city and you're traditionally accustomed to going into the Smithsonian or the zoo, which is also Smithsonian, you now have to go online to get timed tickets. So you don't want to show up without a ticket.
And here at the Museum of the Bible, curators are excited to show visitors the biblical basis for the Magna Carta, which inspired the freedoms we enjoy in America today. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.